Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next one, which is the approval of tax increment financing agreement, which I'm going to. So, Article 16 is to approve a tax increment financing agreement. And as printed in the warrant, and there's a handout in the back. Next slide, please. So what does Article 16 do? It approves a tax increment financing agreement, which is attached, the draft is attached to the handout, between the town and Concord Heights. A draft is available from the town clerk also and is also posted on the town website. It approves an economic development incentive program called the local incentive only. I'll explain what these are. And it authorizes the select board to execute the tax increment financing agreement. So a little bit of background. Next slide, please. Project consists of 83 units of affordable housing located at Junction Village, for those of you that don't know, right adjacent to the back part of the prison, on property that was given to the CHDC by the state in 2013 with restrictions that it could be used only for open space and affordable housing. The proposal before us has about 8 acres associated with the assisted living facility and about 8 acres associated with open space. Next slide, please. The background on this is recalling at town meeting in 2017, there was an approval of a community preservation appropriation of $350,000, and subsequently in additional town meetings, additional money, bringing that CPC appropriation to $1 million. And there was also $1 million in free cash given to or allocated to the project. In the proposal that was submitted by Grantham, it included an annual payment of $75,000 to the town as taxes and a ground lease to CHDC, who actually owns the land. Next slide, please. Part of the ability for Grantham to do this was to apply for tax credits, and that's an annual process. They've applied twice, and not too unexpectedly, they've been turned down. The third round of financing, which is tax credits, which is coming up now, at the end of the second, Grantham was told to do some additional tasks. That was some indication that this third round might be a little bit more productive than the last two. And one of the tasks was to get the official tax liability squared away with the town as estimated by the town assessor. Next slide, please. So how does this work? So there's a Massachusetts general law that creates an economic development incentive program. And part of it is a local option only, which applies just to us as a town. If granted, it allows the select board to create essentially an economic opportunity area, which would be the area associated with the land for Junction Village, on the proposed site. To be able to grant that, which is granted by the state, the application has to have meet certain requirements. The requirement that allows the Junction Village one to be supportable is that it creates new jobs. So it's granted, it allows the select board to go ahead and execute this agreement. So next slide. So what is this thing called a TIF? A TIF is a program embedded in this law that I just mentioned to you that allows the local jurisdiction, the town in this case, to reduce the valuation of the property by a certain percentage and then assess taxes on that. This Junction Village is a commercial enterprise. And so what the TIF allows you to do is take an enterprise that's worth whatever it is as a commercial venture and reduce its valuation, and then apply the same tax rate that we all face to that reduced property valuation. The property valuation for the projects would vary over the period that we're talking about, a little different than our private property. Ours is assessed by the assessor. We all face the same rate, but commercial properties assessment is based also on how well the establishment is doing. So very profitable ones pay more. So the property valuation for the project going forward would vary over the period based on a percentage reduction in valuation, the TIF, the tax rate, it changes, and the commercial success of the property. Next page, please. So, and this is fictitious, but here's an example. An assessed valuation of $10 million, given our current tax rate, it would have a liability of $187,000. If a TIF was instituted at 60%, you would reduce the value of the property from 10 to 4 million, and then apply the same tax rate and come up with a different assessed tax liability. So that's how a TIF works. Next slide, please. For this particular TIF, although it's allowable to be for 20 years, we're going to write it only for 17. The property value, according to the assessor, was $13,009 and change. Million, thank you. And the valuation reduction is 77%. And what that does is that brings the tax for this current year to about $45,000 and change, then plus the $30,000 ground lease that was part of the original proposal, that brings the tax liability to the $75,000 that was contained in the original proposal. So the next slide is just the same as the first slide. I'll emphasize before we take questions that this is still a draft, and I want to thank the assessor, the town manager, Walter Hanian, and Liz Rusk for working very hard over this last week to get a draft of this agreement in place so it could be shared with you here tonight. It may undergo some modest changes as we go to town meeting, but the principle is the same. The assessed value is reduced by an amount to which the tax rate is applied, and that becomes the tax liability for the property. So that's the warrant article. I'd be happy to entertain questions.
If I remember correctly, Janet Rothrock, 618 Nurse Neck Hill Road. If I remember correctly, when the Muse was built, there were 350 units. I'm not sure how many were affordable, but a bunch. And the town got $1 million given to Concord, I think largely to make up for increased services, for instance, ambulance use. And in this case, we're being asked to give even more money to this project, aside from the $1 million in CPC funding. Do we expect increased or decreased services associated with this project or the occupants of it?
Well, first, we're not being asked to give any more money to the project. We're being asked to reduce the assessed valuation so that the tax liability and the ground lease will be consistent with what was budgeted by the project when it was approved by town meeting. So we're not being asked to contribute any more money.
Right, I understand that, but in effect, we will get less money than we might have anticipated? Would that be correct?
No, this TIF gives us exactly the money that was put in the budget that was approved at town meeting. Not the budget wasn't approved at town meeting, but the allocation of CPC funds and the free cash allocation. There was no other statement about additional taxes. I don't know the answer to your services question, Mr. Ohanian. No, you have to either come up here. Why don't you come up here because you might get more questions. And you can just introduce yourself.
Hello, Walter Ohanian, 488 Elm Street, Concord, Mass. Managing Director for the Grantham Group, which is the manager and developer of the proposed assisted living community. So unlike the Muse, this will not have school-aged children in that living there. It's for senior citizens 62 and older, primarily elderly residents that will be living there. There is a chance, obviously, for additional ambulance for E911 calls that could come for sure. in not knowing much about the Muse, this is 83 units, 50 or just over 50% of the units are to residents earning 60% or below the area median income, and the remaining 50% units, which is another 40, is for residents earning less than 150% of the area median income. So this is a 100% rent-restricted community.
Next question.
Stephen Bader, 7 River Street. The language in the draft TIF agreement, includes reference to a cap of $3 million over the term of the TIF. 2 questions about that. Is that the cap on the tax savings to your for-profit corporation?
Correct.
And does that include the savings on the personal property as well, or just the real estate taxes?
On both.
So the property taxes plus the personal property taxes combined
Correct. They've been
cannot
figured
exceed $3 million. So that's what the town is leaving on the table, basically, to support your project.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Hartman. I live at 16 Concord Green. I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but I'm speaking for myself. First of all, I'm wondering, do we have a number that would show us the difference between the amount of taxes you would pay at the full assessed value versus the amount you would pay if we forgive property tax through this TIF agreement? Does anyone have a number of what that amount would be?
It was about 180 some odd thousand. Am I right, Lane? Okay.
And the present value of that discounted back at 17 years at, say, let's say 4%? Do we have a total?
So it was 70, I think it was going to be roughly a 70%, 77%
7%.
TIF, if I remember
That was
correctly.
in the draft,
Correct.
yes. So have we calculated the total, meaning, so you're looking at an annuity of about $187,000 that you won't be paying in property tax over 17 years, is that correct?
No, so let's just back up for a minute.
Go ahead.
So right now we know that their property is generating no revenue whatsoever.
Right, I understand.
Okay. And then secondly is the project has always committed to be able to pay between the town and CHDC up to $75,000. Part of it towards a ground lease and part of it towards real estate taxes.
Was that ever approved at town meeting?
So the budget, the one-stop that we had submitted that was given to the town itself, did have that number in there, yes. And it was actually presented in front of the Finance Committee as well. But not an approval.
Not approved. Okay. Could we get back to my original question, right?
Sure.
So if we were to assess your property at its fair market value,
Yep.
and we were to put a property tax on that, what is the difference between that and what the town will receive at the 77% exemption? And so that's over 17 years. So if we pull that back to the present value, what's the number we're talking about?
So the assessed value would be approximately 180 some odd thousand. And between the amount that's going to real estate taxes and to CHDC, it's $75,000.
So that's about 112
Sure.
over 17 years?
Correct.
Discounted back. Does anybody have a calculator? It's a big number.
Your point.
Okay, thank you.
But I would just add, if I could just add, though, that the issue, I understand your point, of course, but the other way to look at that is if we assessed it at full market value, the project wouldn't happen.
I'm sorry, say that again.
If the project was assessed at full market value, the 187, whatever it is, the project wouldn't happen.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So if we don't forgive some, you're saying that Grantham will in fact walk away. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, unfortunately, the project can't sustain itself with that full tax liability.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Okay. I saw the draft of the agreement, and I'm wondering, is this still in play? So is this still negotiable? Because I understand we're in negotiation. So this is that true that this is still in play? So that
It's still in draft form, correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dory Keogh, 51 MacArthur Road, member of the League of Women Voters, but speaking for myself. After town meeting of 2017, as Mike noted, and $2 million was given to Grantham, or promised to Grantham, there was an agreement between the town, the CHDC, and Grantham. And one of the statements in that agreement was the developer agrees not to request any financial support from the town other than the town funds for the construction and development of the project, and acknowledges that the town is under no obligation to provide any additional financial support. That is written quite clearly. We're not under any obligation. When one reads that, however, the eye of most people in this town reading that, it means they're not going to be asking for any more. And this was actually noted by Mike Lawson in the meeting of the FinCom when he spoke to the FinCom about the procedures that were planned for 2017, and stated, this is in April of 2017, April 9th, he noted that the Select Board is committed to continuing the work with the Department of Correction. He also noted that the Memorandum of Understanding between the Town of Concord and Grantham stipulates that if town meeting is approved in 2017, additional funds will not be requested for this project. So the understanding is that no financial support would be requested in this. However, in the state explanation, so I'm coming to my question,
Sure.
which is in the state explanation called Smart Growth, Smart Energy Tools, District Improvement Financing, DIF, which is also referred to in the warrant article, and the TIF, the Tax Increment Financing. It states, the TIF provides a direct upfront benefit to a developer in the form of tax relief. The money saved on taxes helps to pay the project's construction costs. So in the agreement, it states that there'll be no funds sought for construction's costs. This, in the state explanation of a TIF, says it's saving money for construction costs. So I'm asking you, is it appropriate for the town to be even considering filing this application, which is the essence of a public-private partnership, something that the town has considered long and discussed in great detail over these years? So I'm answering this not to you, Mr. Ohanian, but to Mr. Lawson.
Well, that's why it's in front of town meeting.
I'm asking you if it's appropriate and legal.
I think it is. I think your reading of those documents, I think, are not consistent with mine. No additional funds are being asked.
Absolutely.
This is exactly the same financial package that was presented at town meeting.
What town meeting?
At
At what town meeting?
when we approved the CPC appropriation and the free cash allocation.
This is financial support in that we are not asking Grantham to spend money. We are not giving them money. They are not asking us, hey, Town of Concord, give us $2 million or $3 million. But what they are asking for is support, financial support. And that means that the town is saying we are abating, waiving, in other words, the part that you would be paying. I agree that the town obviously wants affordable housing. This is wonderful. But I also don't agree to say, if you don't play by our rules, we're leaving. The town has been very generous. And I would remind people that when this land became available and the solicitation of interest was sent out, there were 12 respondents. It's not as if this piece of blighted property is not wanted by other people who might prefer to come here and might not be 83 units. And this is not the time to argue, as I know Mr. Lawson is going to remind me. But I do ask people to think about the question. Yes, that's correct. But I thought I'd preempt you on that one. But I am serious that I have a question, and that is this really part of what we promised as a town, what we agreed to? I doubt it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Reed.
This is a short question. Carlin
Okay.
Reed, 83 Wits End. Regarding the ground lease payment, did I hear you say that it's $30,000 or is it $35,000? And if it isn't $35,000, why not?
Yep. So there is a development agreement that's between Grantham Group and the CHDC that says the ground lease payment will be up to $35,000. So the way that we actually currently have the TIF generated is we're assuming approximately $65,000 would actually go towards real estate taxes, and about $10,000 would be going to CHDC on the ground lease.
Next question.
Sure.
Would you consider increasing that total dollar amount so that the small grants program, which is funded by the ground lease, would get their full $35,000?
We would love to be able to do it. The issue that we have is the land itself is deed restricted, which means that it's now rent restricted. I can't increase the rents because of the fact that the ground lease or the taxes have increased dramatically. And that's the issue that we're here, is the reason why we're here today, is there's capped revenue of what we can get for rent, even though we're going to have a tremendous amount of expenses in our operation.
Thank you. Ms. Lauer?
Ruth Lauer, Kais Road. We've had discussions over several years on this project, and certainly we've put Grantham Group through hoops, and they have come through, but now we have this new guy here called Concord Heights, ALF.
Sure.
I think we need by town meeting more information about that, because I don't know that the regional housing people know them, or planning, or any of the other players know who they are.
Yeah. So Christopher Heights Assisted Living is always meant to be the name of what the assisted living community will be. So in essence, the legal name is actually going to be Junction Village Heights ALF LP. And you're correct. In the warrant article, we do have Concord Heights ALF LP. When we actually went to go register the name, believe it or not, Concord Heights is actually taken. It's a housing complex in Springfield, I found out. So the good news is the people in West Concord wanted a Junction Village Association to the name, and so legally it will be. The name has been officially registered. It's Junction Village Heights ALF LP, doing business as Christopher Heights of Concord.
So there'll be a fresh handout
There
with
will
a
be.
fresh name.
Correct.
Okay. And then can I skip to the end? I'm not really fond of numbers. Everybody knows that. 77%. What kind of number is that? Is that what everybody else gets?
So what we did is we met with Lane and we reviewed the project itself, and him and his team came up with an assessed value. And so for us to be able to get to a tax and a ground lease that was both appropriate for CHDC and the town, based within our $75,000, the TIF ended up being 77%.
And that could be refigured over the 17 years?
The percentage, once it's set in stone, will not be refigured. No, it's once the TIF is in place, it's a mechanism that will last through the entire term. What will be guaranteed is the $75,000. Mm-hmm. Just hypothetically, let's say the assessed value is not as robust as maybe the assessor's currently thinking today. So let's say instead of us assuming that it was going to be a $65,000 tax and only $10,000 to CHDC, if the assessed value came in at $45,000, the remaining $30,000 will go to CHDC. The amount from us, from the developer, from the project, has always been promised as $75,000. So when we structure the ground lease, whatever shortfalls could happen potentially on the real estate, on the tax side, will be caught by the CHDC.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Marjorie Daggett, 80 Deaconess. I just wanted to ask about the amount of the assessment. One of your slides gave a number, I think was 13.8 or 9, and in this draft form, the number is 19,998,000.
So the actual total development cost of this project is close to $20 million at this point.
So
The cost of construction and development has just continued to rise.
So if you take 20 million, just for rounding, you take 20 million and you figure at 14.23 per 1,000, which was this last year's tax assessment, you get a tax of 284,571. And so
Sure, but
the other number that I don't understand is this draft talks about 15 years, but you're talking about 17 years.
Yep.
Which is it?
So, couple things. Development cost is not the same as the valuation that the assessor puts on the project. So there's always going to be a difference. And I don't tend to know the reasons why, and that would be a question for Lane. There is a 17-year TIF, and the reason why is there is a tax credit. We're applying for these tax credits, which we've talked about a number of times. There's a tax credit investor who's in the project for 15 years. They don't take their credits until the project lease is up, which is going to be approximately 2 years. So 15 and 2 is where we came up with the 17, is to protect the investment during that time.
But it's 15 in this draft agreement. Is it going to change?
Correct, it would be 17 years.
It will be 17.
Correct.
Okay. And the other thing I wanted to clarify is people have asked how much you're losing. On the basis of a 20 million, for 15 years, the town is losing roughly 3.3 million. But if I understand this correctly, when the sum of all of the of all of the taxes paid, when it hits $3 million, then the 77% goes away. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we say what we're losing is I think we need to also look at what we're gaining. Why is this project even still on our radar? And the reason why is it's the 83 units of affordable housing that it's going to bring to the town of Concord. It's going to create 30 jobs for the town of Concord. And I think those are big wins. Once again, right now, the project isn't getting anything in tax revenue. It would be getting something.
But there are other developments possible. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Clarice Gordon, 100 Newbury Court. You may have answered part of this in the last, because I was wondering about the discrepancy between the 15 years and the 17 years. And I'm also wondering, since we know more about the obligations of the town in, say, 5 years or 10 years, what is the rationale for the particular number of years instead of a shorter period?
So, and I just, in the previous question had answered it, we're applying for these tax credits, and the tax credit investor is in the project for 15 years. They're not allowed to take their tax credits until the project is fully leased, which would be about 2 years. So that's why it's the 15 and the 2, which is 17. And it gives them the protection during their entire time they're here.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Rick Shoup. I live in Deacon Haynes Road. I didn't notice anything about Concord resident preferences.
Sure. So there is a housing preference for the town of Concord.
How long?
It is, Mike would actually know better than I would. Sure.
Oops. Uh-huh. For how long? So I understand. So is that 1 year, 5 years?
It's during the first initial 83 units.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. All 83 units
Correct.
to fill. I got you. Okay. Okay. No, I understand. Thank you. And the other question is, do you think you're going to get 30 long-term care workers in Concord? Most of the places I've gone to long-term care facilities, they tend to be immigrants. And so I may be wrong here, but do you really think you're going to have 30 people in Concord working there? I mean, it would be great if we did. But.
No, I completely understood. It might not be people that directly live in Concord, but they'll have a full opportunity to be able to apply for the job.
So we're good. Okay. Just want to make that clear. Sure. Thank you very much.
I'm coming back with another quick question, or two quick questions. One is on the idea of the types of jobs. I know that talking with people at the hospital and at Newbury Court, there's a great deal of difficulty in getting jobs. I think that perhaps what I have in mind that what you're thinking about. So could you describe the types of jobs that you're thinking of?
So we'll have an executive director who will oversee the entire community. We have a marketing director who will be a leasing agent. We have a maintenance director. We have a executive chef. We also have nurses and a social worker. We also have certified nursing assistants and home health aides, housekeepers, cooks, activities director, and activity assistants.
Okay. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And the other question is that this came into the public only today, this draft, at 11:30 this morning. And many of us, even until last weekend, were not even aware that you were going to be discussing the specifics of a draft agreement. So I wonder if I might ask that there are people here today, and there are many more who would like more questions. Is there a procedure when one is getting a TIF from the state to hold public hearings? Is there any kind of a procedure for that?
So ours will be town meeting
No,
to discuss it,
yeah,
and then after that, it will go to the state to get approved.
I see that. But
So the town meeting approves it first, or doesn't approve it, and then if they do approve it, it will go to the state for approval.
no, I understand that. But what I'm asking for, is there another opportunity for Concord residents who just were able to read this today, at noon today, which really doesn't give much time or much awareness of this? Would there be, and this is up to the select board again, to hold another meeting that would be an opportunity for people to get more information?
We'll take that under advisement. You know, the TIF was difficult to construct, and the warrant, the article in the warrant required it to be available before the public meeting today. We wish we would have had another week or so to continue the negotiations on this. So I take your point, and I'll talk with
I hope you will. And again, I wish that at the February 10th Select Board meeting that you had been specific enough to say that it had been your hope to have this grant written out for today, because I think we were all taken quite unaware. Thank you.
Cynthia Wood, 362 Bedford Street. I'm kind of concerned about the costs and benefits of this. And what I would like to see is some evidence that there's a need for 83 units of affordable assisted living in Concord. And also I'd like to understand whether, given how few Concord residents will benefit over the longer term, does that justify the foregone tax revenues and the additional funds that the town is providing? I think, you know, this obviously has been a process that's gone on for a while, and I think we all need to be sort of brought up to speed on it and understand what the thinking is and how this is good for Concord other than as a means to avoid a 40B.
Thank you. Right. Seeing no.
Nope. Just as a matter of public service, Dean Banfield, Chair of the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee has invited Mr. Ohanian to give a presentation to the Finance Committee at our meeting on March 5th. So if anyone is looking to, you know, find further information, you may attend that meeting, and we'll allow for some amount of public comment. But if it becomes too interruptive, we'll have to move on with our business.
All right, thank you, Walter.
Mike, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen. You had a,
Okay. Yes, on the handout that we got tonight, I just didn't understand one of the calculations. It's on page 2. I thought I saw on the slides that the assessed valuation was 13,900,000 and something. And it says here, the base valuation shall be the assessed value of the property for the fiscal year 2021 in the amount of $1,444,000. And I don't understand how these calculations are working.
You want to take a seat?
The base valuation is as it exists today. Sorry, the base valuation is how the land exists today. Hello? Hello? Is this? There it goes. Thanks, Mark. Stephen Crane, Town Manager. The base valuation is as it exists pre-build. The 13 million is the valuation after as built. After the, so 19 million gets you 13 million.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have comments?
The number, the calculation for taxation over the term of the TIF was about 2.2 million in unassessed or uncollected taxation.
Thank you. Thanks very much.